Welcome, curious minds. Today, we're diving headfirst into a classic that really unpacks the core of human nature and our, let's say, uneasy relationship with society. We're exploring excerpts from Sigmund Freud's big 1930 work, Civilization and Its Discontents. The huge question Freud is wrestling with here, and what we'll be digging into, is basically this. Is civilization itself kind of inherently at odds with our deepest desires for happiness? Freud famously argued, well, yeah, pretty much. And his ideas about why we suffer and the often rocky road of living together in a civilized world, they're still incredibly powerful today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Our mission for this deep dive is really to pull out the most important nuggets from this foundational text. We want to help you understand not just what Freud was saying, but why it still resonates, why it hits home even now. We'll unpack his view on how our individual psychology develops and how it sort of inevitably clashes with this whole big project we call civilization.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a really fascinating idea Freud brings up almost right away. He starts by noting how often we measure success by, external stuff, power, riches, and we overlook something far more precious. But then almost immediately, he introduces this concept, something a friend mentioned to him, called the oceanic feeling.
Yeah, it's a truly intriguing place to start, isn't it, this oceanic feeling? He describes it as a sensation of eternity, something limitless and unbounded. Mm-hmm. It's presented as this purely subjective feeling, not really a belief system, but maybe the very source of the religious spirit for some people. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is Freud himself says, look, I don't really get this feeling personally, which, naturally makes us wonder, is it universal? Yeah. Or is it something only certain people experience?
Right. And from that kind of vast, expansive feeling, Freud then zooms right in on how our inner world develops, specifically the ego. He suggests that our adult sense of self, our ego, actually starts way back in infancy, back when a baby literally can't tell the difference between itself and, say, the external world, like the mother's breast providing comfort.
Exactly. The external world is initially perceived, basically, through the lens of our own internal needs and feelings, purely internal focus. The ego then starts to form by learning to push away anything that causes pain or discomfort, creating what he calls a pure pleasure ego.
Okay.
But of course, this primitive self, it quickly learns it can't just live in that bubble. It has to face reality. And that ability to distinguish internal from external, what's me versus what's out there, that's a massive foundational step in psychological development.
So this leads us to that really striking analogy Freud uses, the city of Rome. He paints this picture of its layers, historical buildings, ruins stacked on top of each other, Roma Quadrata, the Servian Wall, Aurelian's walls. And he uses this to illustrate earlier ways of functioning, earlier mental states.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. But what's really crucial here is that Freud actually uses the analogy to show the difference. He concludes the mind cannot preserve all its history simultaneously like Rome does. It's not like a perfect archaeological dig.
Okay, so it's not a perfect parallel then.
Not quite. Previous mental states don't necessarily survive totally intact, like fully formed memories we can just access. The real point is that our psychological past isn't some static museum. It's dynamic. It's always being reshaped by the present, which suggests maybe those early experiences, they're not consciously remembered in detail, but they subtly shape our current feelings.
Like maybe that oceanic feeling you mentioned?
Exactly. Perhaps it's like a faint echo, a whisper from that early, undifferentiated self before the ego fully formed its boundaries. Maybe that's where that religious sentiment comes from for many.
Okay, so if our inner landscape is this complex, shifting thing, what does all this mean for us, for our pursuit of happiness? Freud dives right into that. He asks, point blank, what's the purpose of human life? And he suggests, well, we seem to strive for a double goal: get pleasure, avoid pain. Pretty straightforward, right?
Seems simple on the surface, but then he asks, can we actually achieve lasting happiness? Freud's take is that real happiness is usually intense episodic pleasure, but then he immediately outlines these three huge sources of human suffering that constantly get in the way.
What are they again?
First, there's our own bodies. They decay, they get sick, they eventually dissolve. That's unavoidable. Second, the external world. Nature's power, floods, earthquakes, disease, just the sheer difficulty of survival sometimes can be overwhelming. And third, and this is maybe the trickiest one, the inadequacy of how we regulate human relationships. Within families, communities, the state, things constantly go wrong there.
That seems to cover a lot of ground. So how do we cope? Does he offer any solutions?
Well, he talks about civilization offering various palliatives, ways to soothe the pain or diversions to take our minds off it.
Okay, like what?
He points to things like art and science as substitute gratifications. They give us pleasure, but maybe a different kind than raw instinct.
Or powerful diversions of interest, he said.
Exactly. It's a bit like Voltaire's idea in Candide, cultivate your garden. Find something absorbing to focus on.
Makes sense. Even getting drunk.
He mentions intoxicating substances too, yeah. As a way to temporarily escape the pressure of reality. A quick fix, maybe, but a common one.
So there are different strategies.
Oh, absolutely. He discusses a whole range. Some people might withdraw almost completely, like yogis seeking inner peace, maybe altered states like trance or ecstasy.
Finding satisfaction within.
And others might use what he calls sublimation. This is a big one for Freud. It's about transforming those basic instinctual aims like libido, which for Freud is fundamental life energy, not just sex.
Right.
Transforming that energy into productive things, intellectual work, artistic creation, scientific discovery. These offer, he suggests, a higher and finer kind of gratification. It's taking that raw energy and refining it, basically.
Interesting. But what about the more, I guess, common paths to happiness, like love?
He definitely addresses that. He considers sexual love a primary source of intense happiness, maybe the most powerful one. He even calls it the prototype for all our striving for happiness.
The prototype, wow.
Yeah. And he also talks about beauty, finding beauty in people, in nature, in art. He says that offers a mildly intoxicating kind of sensation, and it can be a real shield against suffering.
So putting it all together, is there one best way?
Not according to Freud.
Mm-hmm.
He sees achieving happiness as an economic problem of the libido for each individual.
Economic problem. What does he mean by that?
It means everyone has to kind of manage their own psychic energy budget. How much energy do you invest in seeking pleasure? How much in avoiding pain? Where do you direct your fundamental drives? It's a personal balancing act, he thinks. There's no single recipe that works for everyone.
And where does religion fit into this picture for him? You mentioned the oceanic feeling earlier.
Right. Well, his view on organized religion is pretty critical, actually. He famously calls it a mass delusion.
Oof. Strong words.
Very. He sees it as imposing a kind of mental infantilism, keeping people psychologically dependent. He acknowledges it might save many people from individual neurosis by offering rules, comfort, purpose, a father figure in God. But in his view, it ultimately demands unconditional submission and offers a picture of reality that he sees as distorted wishful thinking.
Okay, so that's the individual struggle. Let's shift gears a bit and look at civilization itself. Freud does acknowledge it brings benefits.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about the obvious things that technology, like the telephone he mentions, harnessing nature, building canals, draining swamps, cultivating land, making life safer and easier in many ways.
Yeah, the practical stuff.
And also things like order and cleanliness. He argues these aren't just about utility, they fulfill some deeper aesthetic need, maybe even a psychological one. Order feels good.
So what's the catch? What's the fundamental bargain we make to get all this?
Well, the first requisite of civilization, he says, is justice. Basically, replacing the rule of brute force by individuals with the rule of law, agreed upon by the community.
Okay, makes sense.
The power of the single person gets replaced by the power of a united body, the group. But this process naturally restricts the liberty of the individual. You can't just do whatever you want anymore.
Right.
And he notes that this individual liberty, which maybe had little value in truly primitive, dangerous times, now feels like something precious we've lost. So people might revolt against injustice when they feel the rules are too tight. It's that constant tension.
So what drives people to unite in the first place, according to Freud? What kicks off civilization?
He points to two great forces,
Yeah.
Eros and Ananke.
Eros and Ananke.
Yeah, Eros being the life instinct encompassing love, the drive to bind together, to unite. And Ananke is basically necessity, the demands of external reality, especially work needed for survival.
Love and work, essentially.
Pretty much. He argues that forming families, then larger communities, requires a transformation of love. It has to shift from purely direct sexual aims towards what he calls aim-inhibited friendliness and affection, broader social bonds.
Aim inhibited, meaning the direct sexual goal is blocked or redirected.
Exactly. This aim-inhibited love, like friendship or communal feeling, helps create bonds between people who aren't sexual partners, even strangers. It helps glue society together.
Yeah.
But here's the rub. Civilization, while needing this transformed love, also actively menaces love in its original form.
How so?
Through all its demands, its rules, taboos, laws, customs, particularly around sexuality. He suggests the sexual life of civilized man becomes seriously disabled, restricted, less significant than it might be otherwise. It's a huge sacrifice made for the sake of the group living together smoothly.
That's a pretty big sacrifice. But is that the biggest conflict? Is there something even more fundamental at play?
Oh, yes. This is where Freud drops one of his most famous and perhaps most chilling lines. Homo homini lupus.
Man is a wolf to man.
Precisely. He argues that aggression isn't just something that happens sometimes. It's an inherent, innate instinct in humans, a primary drive.
Innate. Wow. That's bleak.
It is. He says our neighbor isn't just potentially helpful, they're also a constant temptation.
A temptation for what?
To express our aggression, to exploit them, use them, steal from them, humiliate them, cause pain, torture, even kill them.
Jeez, that's a dark view of human nature. Does he offer any way out of that?
He's pretty pessimistic on that front, honestly.
Yeah.
He sees this natural instinct of aggressiveness as the single biggest obstacle for civilization. Culture's main job, in a way, becomes erecting barriers against this instinct, constantly trying to hold it in check.
How? Through laws?
Laws, yes, but also internal psychological mechanisms, things he calls reaction formations.
Reaction formations?
Yes, where your mind unconsciously flips an unacceptable impulse into its opposite. Like someone with intense aggressive urges might become excessively gentle or solicitous. It's a defense mechanism. And he looks at attempts by different ideologies to get rid of aggression. He mentions Christianity's command to love thy neighbor, or communism's idea of abolishing private property to remove conflict.
And he thinks they don't work.
Largely no, because in his view, they're trying to eliminate something fundamental. The aggression itself remains. It just gets repressed or redirected, but it doesn't vanish.
Okay, so if aggression is innate and we can't just get rid of it, how does civilization manage it so we don't just, tear each other apart all the time?
This is where it gets really interesting psychologically. Freud suggests that this aggression, the stuff that can't be directed outwards safely, it gets inward.
Inwards, how?
It gets introjected, he says, internalized, brought inside the self.
Okay.
And this is where a crucial Freudian concept comes into play. The superego.
The superego. I've heard of that, like the conscience.
Exactly. What's fascinating and kind of disturbing is his idea that this introjected aggression forms the superego or the conscience. So the part of you that judges you, that makes you feel guilty, it's powered by your own turned inward aggression.
Wow. So my conscience is basically my own aggression policing me.
That's the idea. The superego then turns on the ego, the part of you trying to navigate reality, and punishes it with feelings of guilt. And where does this guilt originally come from? He traces it back to the dread of authority.
Like fear of getting punished.
Yeah. Initially, the fear of external punishment from parents or society, or maybe even more powerfully, the fear of losing their love and approval. That fear gets internalized as the superego's voice.
Okay, this leads to a really important question then, maybe a paradox. If we renounce our instincts, our gratifications, because we fear authority or losing love, does that actually make us less aggressive or happier?
You've hit on a key Freudian paradox. He suggests, counterintuitively, no. Renouncing instinctual gratification because you're scared, it doesn't make the underlying aggressive impulse just disappear.
So what happens to it?
It fuels the internalization process. The aggression gets turned inward even more forcefully, making the superego more severe, harsher.
So trying not to be aggressive actually makes our inner critic more aggressive towards ourselves.
Precisely. It increases the burden of guilt. We become our own harshest critics, locked in this internal struggle. The more civilized we try to be by suppressing instincts out of fear, the more guilt we potentially feel.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And connecting this to the really big picture, Freud postulates this fundamental ongoing battle of the titans playing out within us and within civilization itself.
Battle of the titans. Between what?
Between Eros, the life instinct, the drive to bind together, create larger and larger units, families, tribes, nations, all of humanity.
Okay, the unifying force.
And its opposite, which he eventually termed the death instinct, or Thanatos. This is the underlying force of aggression, destruction, the drive towards dissolution and returning to an inorganic state.
Life versus death, basically. Love versus aggression.
In essence, yes. And the entire evolution of civilization, Freud suggests, is nothing more than the playing out of this epic struggle within the human species. It's the story of this ongoing battle.
So let me see if I've got this straight. Civilization aims to bring us together, make us safer, give us order.
Right. Driven by Eros and necessity.
But to do that, it demands we suppress or redirect our most powerful instincts, sexuality and aggression.
Exactly. Huge restrictions are placed on both.
And this suppression, this redirection, especially the turning inward of aggression, it creates this deep internal conflict, this guilt, this pervasive feeling of, discontent.
You've got it. That's the core of his argument. Discontent isn't just an unfortunate side effect. It's woven into the very fabric of being civilized.
It's the heavy price we pay, perhaps unavoidably, for living together in relative peace and order.
That's Freud's challenging conclusion.
Wow. Okay. We have definitely taken a deep dive into Freud's, challenging but incredibly insightful perspective on civilization. He really forces us, even today, to grapple with this uncomfortable idea that the very structures we create to protect ourselves and help us flourish might also be the source of a deep-seated unhappiness.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? While our knowledge grows, our technology advances, our control over nature expands, maybe this core psychological struggle, this tension between our innate drives and society's demands, remains pretty constant. And that raises a huge question, right? If civilization inevitably brings discontent, what does that mean for how we think about progress, about building a better future? What does it mean for understanding ourselves?
Yeah, maybe the discontents aren't just something to be eliminated, like a bug in the system. Maybe, as Freud suggests, they're an intrinsic, almost essential part of what it even means to be a civilized human being.
Definitely something to ponder as you navigate your own inner world and how it bumps up against and interacts with the complex, demanding world out there.